She left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter. Not by accident, not because she forgot. It was deliberate, the way she always made a small mess before she left, like marking her territory. A coffee cup with lipstick, a used spoon with the faint glisten of yogurt, and that ring always by the fruit bowl like some careless queen discarding her crown. That morning the sun was still bleeding orange over the rooftops when she came down the front steps in heels too high for Sunday. Her silk blouse clung to her like confidence, and her perfume drifted long after she was gone. I stood behind my hedge holding a squeegee and a bottle of glass cleaner, pretending I hadn't been waiting for her to leave. Pretending I wasn't watching her car disappear. Pretending I wasn't about to do what I'd done every Sunday for the last 2 months. You see, I cleaned her windows while she went to brunch. Not because she paid me, not because I was a hired hand, but because I had a key. And because it was the only time I could breathe in the version of her that no one else saw. Her name was Marlena Kincaid, 37, real estate agent, married to a man who smiled at neighborhood barbecues but traveled too much to be local. The kind of woman who never hosted but always judged your curtains. She lived next door to me for 6 years. We said polite things across the lawn for 5 of them. The 6th year she started leaving her blinds open, and I stopped pretending I didn't look. At first I thought it was innocent, a misstep. But the patterns changed. Her bathrobe slipped lower. The light stayed on longer. And once, just once, I saw her watching me, through the reflection. Just a flicker of a smirk before she vanished into shadow. After that, the gate between our houses never quite latched. And when she left for brunch with her book club girls, I'd find the side door unlocked. And I'd clean her windows. It became a ritual. Wipe, spray, breathe her in, study her books, recenter the ceramic fruit bowl, run my fingertips along the spine of her marriage. And for 60 quiet minutes, I existed in a world where I could pretend I knew her. I wasn't always like this. I used to be a wife, a mother, a woman people noticed. My name is Cara Lansing, and up until 2 years ago, I had a house full of sound sons stomping downstairs, a husband who whistled when he fixed things, a kitchen that smelled like burnt toast, and laughter. But when my youngest left for college and my husband Brian discovered his chiropractor was spiritually aligned, I found myself in a silence so loud it rattled the glass. Marlena didn't know any of this. Or maybe she did. Women like her notice the gaps. They see the cracks in your voice, the way you linger too long in conversations, the way your wedding ring leaves a faint indent, but no longer sits on your finger. And women like her, they press there. That Sunday, the one I'm telling you about now, started the same way. But it ended different. I unlocked her side door and stepped into the cool quiet of her kitchen. I always started with the bay window above her sink. It caught the morning light just right. As I sprayed the glass, I glanced down and froze. Her phone was on the counter, face up, buzzing softly. A text lit up the screen. "You're glowing. Same time next week?" There was no name, just a red heart emoji. My heart thudded hard, too hard for a simple text from a friend. I shouldn't have touched it, but I did. I picked it up, scanned the other messages, and that's when I saw the photos. Taken from behind. Marlena, in a sheer robe, arms lifted the bare slope of her back, captured in morning light. The background was familiar. Too familiar. It was my kitchen window. The photo had been taken from my yard. She'd turned the tables. The realization struck hot in my chest. I wasn't the watcher. I was the watched. Suddenly everything spiraled. The open blinds, the smirks, the unlocked door. She wanted me there. She invited the intrusion not out of affection, not even out of curiosity, but for sport. I sank into one of her bar stools and stared at the phone like it was a detonator. What was I, a game of bored housewife's power play? I should have walked out, but I didn't. I wandered into her bedroom, the one I'd only peeked into before. It was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in tone. Everything too arranged, too curated. A bed without wrinkles, a vanity without dust. I opened her drawers, one after another, until I found the box. It was a wooden jewelry box tucked behind a stack of folded scarves. Inside, not necklaces or earrings, but Polaroids. Dozens of them, some of her, some of strangers, all intimate, all carefully numbered. And one of them, photo number 27, was of me, bent over her front porch, cleaning her window, my hair in a clip, my back arched, my face turned away. Suddenly I couldn't breathe. This wasn't a flirtation, it was a trap. And I'd walked into it willingly. I clutched the photo, heart hammering in my ears, and that's when I heard it. The front door creaked open. She was home, Too early. I turned toward the hallway, and there she was. Marlena. No heels now, no silk, just leggings, a sweater, and a calm, deliberate smile. Her eyes dropped to the photo in my hand. Oh, she said softly, you weren't supposed to see that, not yet. My voice caught in my throat. What is this? She walked toward me slow and measured. Insurance, curiosity, call it what you want. You took pictures of me. She didn't answer, just leaned against the door frame and said, you clean my windows. I collect moments. We all have our hobbies. I wanted to scream, to shove past her, but my legs wouldn't move. She reached for the photo and slid it back into the box. You should go now, Cara. I left without another word. But I didn't go home. I sat in my car for an hour. And when I finally did drive away, I realized something even worse than the betrayal. I wasn't angry. I was aroused. I didn't sleep that night. I tried, I really did. I lay under my grandmother's quilt, the one I used to believe could protect me from everything monsters' heartbreak drafts from the window. But it was useless now. I kept seeing her eyes in the hallway, the way she looked at me with that unreadable calm, like I was a book she'd already skimmed through and underlined. And then the photos, those awful, intimate photos. One of me. Dozens of others. And that message, you're glowing. Same time next week? I wanted to scream. Instead, I stayed quiet like I always had. It wasn't until 3:17 a.m. that I got out of bed. I went into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I studied my face the way Marlena might have, with cold precision. The lines near my mouth, the tiredness in my jaw, the freckles on my chest, once kisses of the sun, now reminders of too many hours alone in the garden. My reflection looked older than I remembered. And yet, I understood what Marlena had seen. Not beauty, not youth, but loneliness. The kind of aching, desperate emptiness that clings to women who've been told their season has passed. I wrapped a robe around myself and walked to the kitchen needing something warm, something grounding. But even as the kettle boiled, I kept glancing at the window, at her house. At that window I'd wiped just hours ago. That's when I saw her. Marlena, standing in her own kitchen, lights off behind her, just her silhouette, still, watching. I froze. And then this part I still don't fully understand. She raised her hand and waved, like we were sharing some secret joke. I didn't wave back. I couldn't. My knees felt soft and my hands trembled. What was this? Was she taunting me, flirting, warning? I didn't know. But I stood there for a full minute before pulling the curtain shut. And I realized something. I was no longer the voyeur. I was the viewed. The next morning, the sky opened up with a summer storm. Rain lashed at the windows I'd polished clean just the day before. The irony stung. My efforts erased in one violent downpour, like they never mattered at all. By noon, the air was heavy and warm. I paced my living room like a ghost. Every room felt hollow. Every clock ticked too loudly. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about that box, that photo, her voice. You should go now, Cara. Why did she keep letting me in? Why photograph me? Why catalog the moments like I was just another one of her objects? And then I remembered something. A name. One that had come up months ago during a wine-soaked evening at the HOA fundraiser. Marlena had been there lounging on the edge of someone else's pool, talking in half-truths with a man named Trent, her husband's old colleague, rumored to be more than that. I remember the way she laughed with him, the way she didn't correct anyone when they assumed she was single. Could Trent have been the one sending those messages? Was he the one taking the photos? Know the angle. The photo of me had come from my yard, which meant it was her. It had always been her. I walked outside barefoot again, the rain just a drizzle now. I crossed the lawn not toward her house, but to the edge of mine. I turned and looked at her front window, and I saw something that stopped my heart cold. My rag. The one I always used, my green microfiber cloth with the frayed edge. It was folded neatly and placed on her porch railing. Like a thank you note without words. I stared at it. I didn't touch it. I just stood there, arms limp at my sides, rain sliding down my neck, unsure if I wanted to cry or scream or ring her doorbell and demand answers. But I didn't do any of that. I went back inside. I made a decision. If I couldn't understand her from the outside, I'd have to get closer. Later that week, I baked a lemon cake. The old-fashioned kind with real zest and a buttery glaze. The kind my mother taught me to make. I boxed it carefully and walked it over to her house in the middle of the afternoon, not on a Sunday. I told myself it was a neighborly gesture, a peace offering, but really I just wanted to see her up close again. She opened the door barefoot in a pale blue shirt dress, no makeup hair, messy in a way that seemed intentional, like she was born with good lighting. "Oh," she said, that same smile, "you don't usually come on Thursdays." "I had extra cake," I lied. "Thought you might want some." She took it without hesitation. "Come in." Her voice was a strange mix of command and invitation. I stepped inside, nerves crawling under my skin. The house smelled like jasmine and orange peel, the same scent I'd breathed in for months, only now it felt almost wrong, like I was trespassing even though I'd been in here dozens of times before. Only this time she knew I was there. We sat in her kitchen, the cake between us, neither of us touching it. She poured tea like we were old friends. "Do you want to ask me something?" she finally said, not looking up. "What were the photos for?" She paused. "You mean what were they about?" "I don't care what you call it. You took them without asking." "I didn't need to ask. You were offering." My mouth went dry. "What the hell does that mean?" She leaned forward, voice quiet. "Do you really think you were invisible all this time? Cara, the way you cleaned those windows, it wasn't about glass. It was about being seen. You wanted someone to notice you. I did." I stood up, heart pounding. So this was some twisted game. "No," she said. "It was a mirror. And you came looking for your reflection." That's when I knew Marlena didn't just watch me. She understood me. And that was far more dangerous, because now I couldn't stop wondering what else she saw and what else she might take. Marlena said my name like she owned it. "Cara," she purred as I hovered near her doorway like I was a misbehaving child, and she was the one tasked with teaching me shame. "Don't look so frightened. Sit." I didn't. Not at first. I stood there clutching the chair back like it might save me from drowning. My breath caught in my throat, and the silence between us felt like a held note, beautiful, awful, and far too long. "What do you want from me?" I asked. It came out more like a whisper than the demand I intended. She tilted her head. "I want what you already gave me." "I didn't give you anything." Her lips curled. "Didn't you?" I sat down then, because I didn't want to hear the answer while standing. And she was right. I had given her something. My attention, my silence, my fascination, my small betrayals of boundaries of trust of myself. Every time I stepped through her side door, every time I touched her curtains or breathed in her scent, I gave away a piece of myself. I just didn't think she'd kept the receipts. She poured more tea. Her hands were graceful, practiced. Everything Marlena did seemed choreographed, like she'd once studied performance art and decided to live her entire life on a stage only she could see. "You're lonely," she said as casually as if she were pointing out the weather. "And you're cruel." The words slipped out before I could stop them. To my surprise, she didn't flinch. She just leaned back in her chair and let her fingers trace the rim of her teacup. "Maybe," she said, "but I'm not the one who kept breaking into a neighbor's house just to wipe down her windows and sniff her perfume." My stomach twisted. "I never—" "You did," she interrupted, "and you liked it." I stood again too fast. My chair scraped loudly across the tile. "You watched me," I said. "You photographed me." She shrugged, unbothered. "And you're angry because you weren't the only one doing the watching." That's when it hit me. She wasn't denying it. She enjoyed it. And worse, some dark, aching part of me did too. I left without another word. The cake remained untouched on her counter. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I didn't check my emails or water the plants. I sat in my darkened living room, with the lights off, staring at the glow from her window, wondering if she was watching me again. Part of me wanted to shut the curtains. The other part wanted to open them wider. The next few days passed in slow motion. I avoided her. Didn't go outside when I heard her heels clicking on the sidewalk. Didn't check the mailbox until late at night. I was determined to let things fade, to erase the evidence of my own unraveling. But Marlena was not the kind of woman who let go of a thread once she'd started tugging. The letter came 3 days later. No return address, just a thick cream envelope slipped through my mail slot. Inside a single Polaroid. Me, standing in her kitchen holding her phone, that day. The angle was different this time, more intimate, closer, my face fully visible, confused, soft, vulnerable. On the back in looping script, "This is how you looked when you realized I saw you." I sat down on the stairs, held the photo in my lap, and cried. You might be wondering, why didn't I go to the police? Why didn't I march back over and confront her again, demand she destroy the photos, threaten her with a restraining order? The answer is simple. I didn't want to destroy the photos. I wanted to understand them. I wanted to know why she kept them, why she chose me, why she had turned our ordinary beige neighborly dance into something twisted and layered and, God help me, erotic. It wasn't just about the images. It was about what she saw, because somewhere along the way, Marlena saw through me. past the grief I wore like armor, past the friendly smiles and HOA meetings. She saw the woman underneath, the one who ached, who longed to be needed, not for errands, not for chores, but for presence. And she gave me that. In her own cruel, calculated way, she gave me something I didn't know I was starving for. I didn't respond to the photo. Not at first. But 2 days later, I found myself back at her side gate. I stood there for a long time, unsure whether to knock or just walk in. The door was unlocked, as always, but this time I felt like a guest instead of a thief. I entered slowly. No lights were on, but soft jazz played somewhere in the distance. Her kitchen was spotless. The scent of lemon polish lingered in the air. And there on the table was a note. Just 5 words. "Upstairs, if you're ready." I stood there, my hand trembling around the note. Then I climbed the stairs. Every step felt like a choice. Every creak a confession. Her bedroom door was ajar. Inside, candlelight, shadows dancing on the walls, and Marlena seated at her vanity, brushing her hair. She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. "I knew you'd come," she said. And the worst part, so did I. The sound her hair made as she brushed it, it haunts me more than anything that happened after. It was slow, rhythmic, almost loving. Like she wasn't brushing her hair for me or even for herself, but for the memory she was about to create. A memory she was planning to own before it ever happened. I stood there in her doorway spine, pressed against the frame, every inch of me stiff and buzzing with questions. Fear, curiosity, heat. She still hadn't turned around. "You look better in shadows," she said. It wasn't a compliment, it was an observation, a diagnosis. Like she'd been studying me in the dark for weeks, months, and had finally decided where I fit in her frame. I should have turned around, walked back down those stairs, closed the gate behind me and changed my locks. But I didn't. Because I'd already crossed the line. Because I didn't know who I was anymore without the reflection she gave me. Marlena finally stood. She walked to her closet without looking at me, pulled out a wine-colored robe and slipped it over her slip dress like it was a second skin. She moved like water, without hesitation, without apology. I couldn't breathe. "You think you're in control?" I finally said, my voice quieter than I expected. She laughed, not cruelly, not kindly either, just knowingly. "No," she replied, tying the sash of her robe. "I know I'm not. That's what makes it fun." Her words sank in like molasses, and then she faced me. It was the first time I saw her without the armor. No lipstick, no curled lashes. Just Marlena, raw and terrifyingly present. She took 2 steps toward me and stopped inches from my face. "I'm not the villain in your story, Cara." Her breath was warm, smelled like peppermint tea and something sharper underneath. "I never said you were. You think I lured you, that I made you want something forbidden." I didn't respond. "Here's the truth," she whispered, her hand brushing the side of my arm. "You were waiting to be caught. I just saw it first." I closed my eyes, because everything in me screamed to run. But I didn't, because a deeper, darker part of me wanted to be kept. That night didn't unfold like a romance novel. There was no swelling music, no dramatic confessions. Just 2 women in a room with too many secrets and too few lies left to tell. We didn't touch, not in the way you'd expect. Instead, we talked. About our husbands, hers absent mind forgettable. About motherhood, how it gave and took and left us strangers in our own bodies. About desire, how it shifts after 40, how it hides in polite glances and shared recipes, and the way someone wipes sweat from their collarbone. "I watched you," I admitted, but it wasn't sexual, not at first. "I know," she said. "That's what made it interesting." She handed me a photo, not of me, not of her. Of a man, gray at the temples, soft smile, sharp eyes. "Is that your husband?" She shook her head. "No, that's your husband, Brian." My stomach dropped. I took that 3 years ago. He was having lunch with my friend Serena, their 3rd business meeting. She cried when he ghosted her. I felt my world tip sideways. "You're lying." I wish I was. I couldn't speak. I stared at the photo, Brian laughing, his hand on Serena's wrist, the same hand that used to warm my back in bed. "You don't know the half of it," Marlena added, "but you will, if you want to." I didn't ask why she had it. I didn't ask how long she'd been collecting evidence. Because I suddenly understood this wasn't just about me. This had started long before the open window. I was just the latest note in her symphony. I left her house at 2:14 a.m. No words, no goodbye. She didn't ask me to stay. She didn't need to. She knew I'd be back. Because the story wasn't finished. Because I had questions. Because I hated her for what she revealed, and hated myself more for wanting her to reveal it. I drove for hours. No destination, just back roads and late-night gas stations and silence that wrapped around my ribs too tightly. And I realized something. I wasn't the woman I thought I was. Not anymore. I had become the woman in Marlena's windows, and she had become the voice in my head. When I finally returned home, the sun was just beginning to rise. I checked my mailbox on instinct. Inside another envelope. Same cream paper, same no return address. But this time it held only 2 words scrawled in red ink. Next Sunday. And beneath it a photo of me on her staircase. Looking up, caught in mid-step. Expression unreadable, and yet undeniably mine. The next Sunday never came. At least not the way I imagined it. I didn't wake early and press my dress. I didn't bake another cake or stand by the fence with trembling fingers. I didn't clean her windows. I couldn't. Because the night before, everything shattered. I was brushing my teeth when the phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I nearly ignored it, who calls at 11:42 p.m., but something in my stomach told me to answer. Cara Lansing, the voice asked, a man, crisp official. Yes. This is Officer Delgado with the Franklin Police Department. I'm calling about your neighbor, Marlena Kincaid. You listed her as an emergency contact for HOA records. We found your number attached to her file. My heart seized. What happened? She's been in an accident. Single vehicle collision off Ridge Hill. She's stable but unconscious. No ID on her except her phone and a folded HOA notice with your name scribbled on the back. I sank to the floor, toothbrush still in hand. She'll be okay, right? A pause. Too early to tell. There's head trauma, some internal bleeding. We need someone to bring her medical documents. Emergency contact said you had house access. I do. I barely remember driving. I threw on the first sweater I touched and drove to the hospital in slippers. The whole drive there, one word kept pulsing behind my eyes. Why? Why was my name in her bag? Why was I her emergency contact? Why did she trust me with everything, photos, secrets, pieces of her? No one else seemed to notice. And more terrifying, why did I care so much? The hospital was sterile, buzzing with fluorescent light and quiet beeps. A nurse led me to a small waiting room and asked for her documents. I had none, but I gave them what I could. Her birthday, her husband's name, her medications, at least the ones I'd seen in her bathroom cabinet while pretending to dust. She talked about you, the nurse said, gently jotting down notes. Called you her guardian angel. I froze. She said if anything ever happened to her to call the woman who cleaned her windows. The woman who cleaned her windows. As if that's all I was. Or maybe it was her way of saying everything, without saying anything. I wasn't allowed to see her that night. She was in surgery. So I went home. And her house, God, her house felt like a monument. A crime scene, a shrine. I stepped inside with her spare key just as I had 100 times before. But this time I wasn't sneaking. I wasn't watching her. I was searching. For clues, for comfort, for something to anchor me to the reality that she had not in fact disappeared. And that's when I saw it, on her kitchen table neatly arranged beside a half-burned candle and a glass of red wine. A Manila envelope. My name written on the front in her script. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside photographs. Of Brian, with Serena, with other women, a hotel keycard, receipts, even a letter in Marlena's handwriting addressed to me. Cara, you deserve the truth, even if you hate me for how it arrives. I didn't take the photos for revenge. I took them because I couldn't stand to see another woman give her life to someone who didn't deserve her devotion. Brian is not who you think he is. He never was. I've watched you shrink yourself for years. You were never invisible. You were just trying to disappear. You don't owe me anything. But if you want to know the whole story, I'll be waiting. Next Sunday. M. I pressed the letter to my chest and collapsed into her kitchen chair. I wept until my body trembled. Because somewhere between our twisted game and those stolen moments, Marlena had done something no one else had done in years. She chose me, not for who I used to be, but for who I really was when no one was looking. She stayed unconscious for 2 more days. When she finally woke, the nurses said she didn't speak, just stared out the window like she was watching something only she could see. I visited twice. Each time she was asleep. Each time I left a fresh flower on her bedside table, jasmine. She never acknowledged it, until the 3rd visit. I walked in expecting her eyes to be closed as always, but this time she turned her head, slowly, and looked at me. Her face was pale, lips dry, but her voice, though faint, still carried that same sharp lilt. I didn't think you'd come, she rasped. I always do, I whispered. She smiled, just barely. Did you read it? I nodded. And do you hate me? No, I said. I think I hate myself more, for needing you to show me. Her eyes softened. You cleaned my windows, she said, as if it were the punchline to the cruelest joke. I sat down beside her and took her hand. And for once I didn't feel like the intruder. I felt like the witness. The only one who ever saw Marlena not as a seductress, not as a collector of secrets, but as a woman who had once been shattered herself. A woman who chose to build a house of mirrors to survive, and invited me inside. Now I saw it clearly. The woman in the window had always been me. Marlena came home 10 days later. Her face was paler, yes, a faint scar above her brow, a stiffness in the way she moved that hadn't been there before, but she still wore her robe like armor. She still carried that invisible weight, the one you don't see until someone shows you how much they've learned to carry it. She didn't smile when I met her at the door. She just looked at me like she wasn't sure if I was real or a memory from the morphine. Then she opened the door and stepped aside. "Tea?" she asked, as if no car had crashed, as if no secrets had been exposed, as if we hadn't silently rewritten each other's lives without permission. "Please." We didn't speak for the first half hour, just moved through the routine we had once built from stolen glances and polite lies. Only now everything was out in the open. I sat in the same chair. She poured from the same pot. The kitchen smelled of jasmine again, though fainter now, as if it too was recovering from the blow. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat, unadorned. "Did you tell Brian?" I shook my head. "No." "Why not?" I didn't answer right away, because the real answer was ugly, because I didn't want to save him. But I didn't want to lose the only version of myself I still knew. And I didn't want to admit that the truth no longer felt like justice. It felt like a release I hadn't earned yet. "He stopped being my husband a long time ago," I finally said. "I just didn't realize it until I saw him through your eyes." Marlena nodded once. "He's a collector, like I used to be." The room stilled. "What do you mean?" She took a long sip of tea before answering. "I used to collect women like you," she said. "Not in the way you think. I didn't seduce them. I watched them. The quiet ones, the sad ones, the ones who wore bright lipstick but only spoke at dinner parties when someone else asked their opinion." My breath caught. "I saw how invisible you'd become, Cara. How you moved like a woman apologizing for her own house. And it made me furious. Not at you, at the world. At the way it teaches women to fold themselves into corners just to keep the peace." Tears pricked my eyes. And so she continued. "I left the window open. And I left the door unlocked. And I left the blinds pulled high. Because I wanted to see. Would you walk in?" I laughed bitterly, and I did. "You ran," she whispered. There was a moment of silence between us then. Not tense. Not cruel. Just honest. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small velvet box, placed it on the table. "I was going to mail this to you," she said, "before the accident." I hesitated, then opened it. Inside a photograph. Of me. Not bent over, not caught in shadow. Just sitting in her chair, reading one of her books, the sunlight catching my hair, my face half turned calm. And I looked content. Peaceful even. It took me a moment to recognize myself. "You looked happy," she said. "I thought you should see it." I touched the edge of the photo like it might burn me. "I don't know who that is." "You will," she said. Later that night, I stood at my own kitchen window and stared out into the darkness. Her house across the lawn was dim now. No candles, no music. Just the echo of everything we'd unspoken. And I thought about the women like me. The ones who smiled for the PTA, but cried in their minivans. The ones who said, "I'm fine," with surgical precision. The ones who folded laundry and carried groceries and tucked away their needs like expired coupons no one would ever redeem. We all have a Marlena, don't we? Or we are a Marlena. Or we become one. The next morning I woke to something unexpected. A sound. A scrubbing sound. I pulled open the curtain and there she was. Marlena, on her knees outside my kitchen window, rag in hand, wiping glass in slow, steady circles. She looked up at me through the pane and didn't smile. Just nodded once. And I understood what she meant. She was giving it back. The gift, the gaze, the permission to be seen. And I let her. I stepped away from the window. And I cried. But this time it wasn't from shame. It was the sound of a woman remembering she still had a name. And someone finally was saying it correctly. I tried to burn the photo. The one Marlena gave me of me sitting in her chair, sunlight in my hair, a book forgotten in my lap. I stood over the kitchen sink with a lighter, the flame flickering inches away, waiting for conviction to rise up inside me like it always used to. But nothing came. No anger, no fear, not even guilt. Just me. Looking peaceful, looking whole, looking like a woman who had remembered herself for one brief, unguarded moment. I blew out the flame and tucked the photo back inside the velvet box. That was the moment I stopped running from it. From her, from me. Marlena didn't mention the window cleaning again. She never brought it up, never made a joke, never smirked knowingly across the lawn like she used to. It was like she'd drawn a curtain over that part of our story and moved on to a new act. Or maybe she was waiting to see what I'd do now that the glass had been cleaned from both sides. Instead, she invited me to brunch. Real brunch, with actual food. Not the imagined ones I used to think she had with perfect friends who drank mimosas and judged their husbands' mistresses. Just her and me, on her porch, French toast and cut fruit, and silence that no longer suffocated. "Do you miss him?" she asked, pouring syrup. "Brian," she nodded. I shook my head slowly. "I think I miss who I had to be to keep him." She chewed quietly. "Then you were never you with him. I could see it. Every time he came back from one of his trips, you'd shrink." I laughed under my breath. "You really were watching me, huh?" "All the time," she said unapologetically. "Why?" "Because I was waiting for the moment you realized it." I sipped my coffee and let that truth sit between us, warm and sharp. "Did you ever love him?" I asked, not even sure why I said it. She didn't look surprised. Brian nor I liked the idea of him. Men like him are good at selling ideas. Of loyalty, strength, wholeness. Of rescuing women who never needed rescuing. We both went quiet after that. Because neither of us wanted to say out loud the thing we both knew. We had spent years trying to make ourselves small enough to be loved by men who never once asked what we wanted to grow into. That night I walked past her window deliberately this time. Not to spy, not to peek. Just to see. She was sitting in her living room, knees folded beneath her, watching a black and white film with the sound low. She looked up and caught me mid-glance. She didn't wave. She just raised her wine glass in acknowledgement, and I nodded back. For the first time it felt like we were equals. Not confessor and collector, not saint and sinner. Just two women on either side of a glass wall we had both chosen to break. Days passed. Then a week. Then one morning I heard a knock at my back door. I opened it and there she was. No robe, no lipstick, just Marlena. Holding a single envelope. "This came to my house," she said, "but it's for you." I took it puzzled. Inside a letter from Brian's lawyer? Apparently he had filed for divorce. No conversation, no warning. Just a sharp clinical notification that I was now the past tense of his life. I looked up at her. She didn't gloat. Didn't smirk. She just asked, "Are you okay?" I laughed. A short breathless sound. "No, but I will be." She stepped forward, and for the first time hugged me. Not tightly, not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to say you survived. Enough to say you're not alone. Enough to say you can begin again. That night I stood in front of my own mirror and stared at my reflection. I didn't look younger. I didn't look stronger. But I looked like someone who had finally stopped hiding. From herself. From the past. From the woman across the street who had dared to see what others ignored. Whoa. I didn't clean any more windows after that. Not hers. Not mine. Because the glass no longer needed polishing. We saw each other clearly now. And I was no longer afraid of what was reflected back. He came back on a Tuesday. That's what made it so jarring. Marlena's husband, Dean Kincaid, was the kind of man who looked like he should only ever appear in calendars or glossy magazine ads. Hair slightly too perfect. Smile just crooked enough to seem charming. Presence large even when he was silent. And suddenly there he was. Suit jacket slung over one shoulder. Rolling a suitcase up the front walkway as if he'd only been gone for a weekend. As if everything inside that house hadn't changed while he was away. I was trimming my roses when I saw him. My breath caught clippers frozen midair. He didn't look at me. Not at first, but Marlena did. She stepped out onto the porch when she heard the suitcase wheels click against the stone. She didn't run to him, didn't fold into his arms. She just stood there, her arms crossed. And when he said, "Hey babe," in that confident performative way men say when they've been forgiven too many times before, she didn't answer. Not with words. Just a glance toward me. And then back to him, as if to say, "We are not the same anymore," and she sees it. I avoided Marlena the rest of that day. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't trust myself to stay neutral. I didn't want to witness her slipping back into the shadow of a man who once called her too intense at a block party while she was 5 feet away. I didn't want to see her get small again, but she surprised me. Later that evening I heard voices. Not shouting, not soft. Firm. I sat on my porch, pretending to read while the breeze carried fragments of their conversation. Dean, it's still my house, Mar? Marlena, it's a shared house, but we're not sharing anything anymore. Dean, this is about her, isn't it? That neighbor you're always watching? Silence. Dean again, what is she, your project now, your replacement hobby? Then I heard something slam. A door. Maybe her voice. Maybe her hand on the banister. Maybe the sound of an old version of herself locking itself away for good. The next morning, Dean was gone. Again. A lift pulled up at 6:48 a.m. I watched him load his suitcase. No kiss goodbye, no backward glance. Just a man exiting a stage he never fully understood. And when Marlena came outside, still barefoot, still wrapped in that robe, I offered her coffee over the fence. She accepted. We didn't talk about him. We talked about the weather, my dying basil plant, the neighbor's new lawn ornaments, which were tacky enough to be historic. But her eyes were different, clearer, colder. Ready? Later that week, she gave me a key to her house, not as an invitation to clean, not as a test, but as something more sacred. Trust. I'm changing the locks, she said, handing me the new spare, just in case he gets any ideas. You sure you want me to have this? I'm sure I want someone to know what's behind my doors, if I ever disappear again. I didn't ask what that meant, because I already knew. It meant she didn't want to be alone anymore, but only with someone who had already seen her worst angles and didn't flinch. That night I opened the velvet box again, the photo of me, sunlight on my cheek, eyes soft. And behind it I found something I hadn't noticed before. A second picture. Of her, but not like I'd ever seen her. She was in a car, window down, hair messy, no makeup, laughing so hard her face was blurred with motion. Someone else had taken it. Someone who once saw her the way she'd later come to see me. On the back, this is what it looks like when you don't apologize for taking up space. No name, no date. Just a memory. I kept both photos, side by side. Proof that we were both at one point or another seen. And neither of us forgot how good that felt. The next time Marlena came over, she didn't knock. She just walked in, handed me a bottle of red, and said, it's your turn to tell me something. So I did. Everything. My marriage, my silence, the lies I told myself to stay, the way I shrank, the way I wanted to disappear so quietly that no one would even ask where I went. And when I finished, she didn't pity me. She poured the wine and whispered, now we're even. It wasn't planned. She didn't ask. And I didn't pack a bag. But that night, 3 weeks after Dean vanished again, 2 days after she dropped off lavender at my doorstep with no note, I stayed. The sky had turned a quiet kind of violet the way it does in early fall. The wind whispered through the trees, and I could smell her cooking something garlic maybe and lemon. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't slept well in days. So when she opened her door and said simply, you look like hell, I didn't feel offended. I felt seen. I stepped inside. Dinner was warm, simple, 1 plate each, no small talk. After we sat in her living room, the lights dimmed the air thick with something that wasn't quite tension, but wasn't relaxation either. A middle space. Something neither of us had words for. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest. I curled into the corner of her couch legs tucked under me. Our wine glasses sat untouched on the table. I used to think loneliness was a punishment, I said suddenly. Now I think it was a warning. She looked at me. A warning for what? For how easy it is to lose yourself pretending everything's fine. She nodded. Then, Cara, do you still feel like a ghost in your own life? I looked at her, really looked at her, and said, not when I'm here. That did something? Her eyes softened, then sharpened, like she wanted to reach for me but didn't trust her own hands. So I reached for hers instead, and that's how we stayed. Fingers interlaced, breathing quietly, refusing to let go. When midnight came and the wind howled harder, she got up and wordlessly walked toward the stairs. At the landing, she looked back. Not a question, not a command, just a glance, and I followed. Her guest room had been redone. She'd added a quilt, fresh candles, a small shelf of books I loved. It was a room that didn't exist last month. It had been made for me. I changed into one of her oversized t-shirts. It smelled like her dryer sheets and something sweet underneath clove, maybe. I lay in bed with the door half open, listening. Not for sounds of danger, but for the sound of her. For once, not because I was spying, but because I was safe. She knocked once before entering. I sat up. I can't sleep, she said. Me either. She came and sat beside me on the edge of the bed. Neither of us spoke for a long time. And then in a whisper like wind between trees, can I stay? I moved over. She slid beneath the covers. And for the first time our bodies touched without pretense. Her hand brushed mine, My leg found hers. There was no kiss. No dramatic declaration. Just the warmth of two women who had watched each other from opposite windows for too long and finally decided to open the door between them. In the dark, she asked, "Do you regret any of it?" I thought about the windows, the secrets, the betrayal, the guilt, the letters, the photographs. "No," I said, "because it brought me here." She exhaled and nestled into the crook of my neck. That night, we didn't make love. We just made space for everything we'd carried, for everything we weren't allowed to say before. And when I woke in the morning, she was still there, still breathing softly, still warm beside me, still real. Later we made coffee in our robes. She gave me the mug with the chip on the rim. I didn't mind. It was the first time I felt like something in her life that wasn't curated or staged, just used, trusted, loved in some quiet, dangerous way. When I got home, I found a note slipped through my front door. From Brian. One line: "I'll be in town next week. I need to talk." No apology. No signature. No acknowledgement of the divorce he filed and disappeared from. Just another demand. But I didn't feel panic. I felt ready, because I knew where I'd be sleeping that night. And it wasn't in the cold bed he left behind. It was in the home I helped restore with silence, with secrets, with windows finally wiped clean. Brian arrived unannounced. I was folding linens in the guest room, her guest room, when the doorbell rang. I heard it echo through the quiet of Marlena's house, startling both of us. She looked up from her book. I looked down at my bare feet. The doorbell rang again. He said he'd come. I whispered more to myself than to her. Marlena didn't say anything. She just stood, moved to the window, and peeked through the curtain. "He's not alone," she said softly. I joined her. There he was. Brian. Same pressed shirt, same expression of half concern, half arrogance. And beside him, a woman. Blonde, younger, too polished for this neighborhood. Not Serena, not anyone I recognized. But the way she clung to his arm like a child clutching a parent in a thunderstorm, there was history there, and betrayal. Brian always needed an audience, even for his apologies. "I'll handle it," I told Marlena, but my voice trembled. She touched my hand. "You don't have to open the door." "I do." "Why?" "Because the woman I was when I married him needs to hear me say it's over." So I opened the door. Brian smiled like he hadn't shattered me into pieces. "Cara," he said, like the sound of my name was something he missed tasting. The woman beside him offered a small wave, uncertain. "I didn't invite them in." "You said you needed to talk," I said flatly. "I do," he said. "This isn't how we should leave things." "You already left, Brian. You just sent the paperwork to make it official." He flinched, just barely. "I want to explain." "I'm not interested in explanations." The woman spoke, then her voice fragile. "I told him this was a bad idea. I didn't know he was still trying to reach out to you." I looked at her, really looked. And I realized she wasn't a threat. She was a version of me, 10 years ago, before the weight of silence pressed me thin, before I learned to disappear in plain sight. "You should leave," I told her gently, "before he makes you forget who you were." She blinked. Brian frowned. "That's enough." "No," I said louder now. "This is enough. You don't get to walk up to my door, drag your newest chapter onto the porch, and pretend you're doing something noble." His eyes flickered past me, to the window. And I knew what he saw. Marlena, standing just inside. Watching, unapologetic, wearing my robe, holding my mug. He paled. His mouth opened then closed. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "You made your choices, Brian." "And you made yours," he said, voice sharp now. You're with her." I didn't answer. 'Cause I didn't need to. Because the answer was written all over his face. He never saw me, but she did. And that was something he would never be able to forgive. Not because it was wrong, but because it made me free. They left after that. No final words. No dramatic shouts. Just footsteps fading down the walkway and the low hum of a car pulling away. When I closed the door, my knees nearly buckled. Marlena was there instantly. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't have to. She just wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "You didn't just close the door on him. You opened it for yourself." That night I stood in front of the mirror again. Same woman, same eyes, but something was different. I no longer looked like someone waiting to be chosen. I looked like someone who had chosen herself. Marlena didn't sleep in the guest room anymore. We didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. Sometimes clarity doesn't arrive with lightning. Sometimes it arrives as a woman standing in your hallway with nothing but a teacup and an open heart. I asked her once. "Did you know back when you left your windows open? Did you know it would end like this?" She smiled. No, but I hoped. We watched movies together that night. Not old films, not something symbolic or tragic. Just a bad romantic comedy where no one got what they wanted. And we laughed. Not bitterly. Not ironically. Just laughed. And when she fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, I didn't move. Because for the first time, I wasn't afraid of being seen. Or known. Or loved. Even if it started with a lie. Even if it began in the shadow of someone else's marriage. Even if the glass had to crack for the truth to shine through. Because sometimes the clearest view comes only after the storm. I should have closed the curtains. It was a quiet evening, one of those early autumn nights where the breeze carries both summer's warmth and winter's promise. Marlena and I had just finished dinner, grilled peaches, goat cheese, arugula. She always cooked like she was trying to tell a secret through flavor. We were dancing, not in a performative movie scene kind of way, just swaying barefoot in the living room while an old jazz record played low, her head on my shoulder, my hand on the small of her back. And I forgot the window was open. Or maybe I didn't. Maybe some part of me wanted to be seen, because for so long I'd only been watched, not seen. And this felt like proof that I had become real again. The next morning I found a pie on my front step. Store-bought, blueberry. No note. Just a small card paper-clipped to the plastic lid. I always wondered if it was more than windows. Glenna, my neighbor across the street, 73, knits in the window, collects gossip like teacups. I nearly laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was inevitable. Glenna knows I told Marlena that afternoon as we folded laundry together. She didn't look up. Glenna's known since March. I blinked. What? She asked me once if you ever smiled when you weren't looking at me. I told her I didn't think so. You didn't deny it. She was the first person to say it like it didn't sound like a threat. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Does that mean everyone else knows? She shrugged. Does it matter? I didn't answer. Because it did. And it didn't. I started noticing the changes after that. The way Nancy across the fence avoided eye contact. How Jerry, the HOA president, stopped waving when I passed his porch. A few cold shoulders, a few too long glances, whispers behind tinted sunglasses. They weren't subtle, but they weren't cruel either. Just confused. Suspicious. Like they couldn't quite figure out if we were brave or broken. I brought the pie inside, ate a slice at the table, and then brought the rest to Marlena's. She took one bite and said, "Too sweet." I smiled. She's trying. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, slanted script, no return address. Cara, I used to think you were tragic. Now I think you're free. I envy that. I hope I'll find my window one day, too. M. I froze. It wasn't Marlena's handwriting. It wasn't signed Marlena. It was someone else's M. I read it 3 times before folding it neatly and placing it in the drawer beside Marlena's velvet box. There were more of us. Women watching through the glass, waiting to be pulled in, or step out, or break it. Later that week, Glenna waved to me as I walked past her house. Just once. No words. But the message was clear. I see you. I don't hate what I see. And I realized something. Scandal passes. But truth lingers. And when the dust settles, the ones who matter will still be standing at your door with pie. That night, Marlena and I lay in bed reading our separate books under the same blanket. You regret any of it? She asked quietly, eyes on the page. Some of it. She looked at me. But not this, I said. She didn't smile. She just reached for my hand under the covers and squeezed it. And in the silence, I remembered something she once told me. We don't choose who sees us first, but we do choose who we let keep looking. And I had let her keep looking, even after she saw the cracks. Even after she caused some of them. Because what we'd built wasn't clean, but it was real. The next morning, I caught Glenna placing something else at my door. A small bouquet. Sunflowers. No card this time, just a nod. A woman who'd seen too much in her lifetime to pretend anymore. And I whispered to the flowers, "Thank you." Because somehow they meant more than permission. They meant welcome. It had been months since I'd opened the velvet box. I'd tucked it away high on the shelf in my bedroom closet, as if putting it out of sight could silence the echoes inside it. But that morning, crisp quiet with Marlena still asleep beside me, I felt drawn to it. Like a thread in my chest had been tugged. I crept out of bed, careful not to wake her, and padded barefoot across the hall. The house was still. Not the kind of stillness that comes from absence, but the kind that comes from being full. Like every wall held a memory now. Every hallway had seen a different version of us walk through it. I opened the closet, reached up, and pulled the box down. It was heavier than I remembered. Inside, the photos were still there. Me, sitting by the window. Her laughing in that car. Brian, a ghost in too many frames. But beneath them, tucked under a folded linen handkerchief, was something I hadn't noticed before. A letter, unopened, sealed with a wine-red wax stamp. The envelope was addressed to no one, just the word after. My fingers shook as I slid it open. Inside was Marlena's handwriting, slanted, unmistakable. Cara, if you're reading this, it means you stayed. And if you stayed, it means you saw me, not the curated version, not the window-dressed version, but the real one. The one that collects too many things and trusts too few people. The one that tested you before she welcomed you. I don't believe in fate, but I believe in noticing. And you, my love, were always worth noticing. Even when you thought you were invisible. If one day I'm gone, if I leave or disappear or get tired of being looked at, please remember you were never a mistake. You were the window I never thought I'd open. And once I did, I didn't want to shut it again. Keep the box. Burn it if you need to. Frame it if you want. But whatever you do, don't go back to sleep. M. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat there cross-legged on the floor, the letter in my lap, and listened to the slow, even breath of the woman who wrote it. As if some part of her already knew she would save me, and still wasn't sure if I'd save myself. That afternoon, we cleaned out the shed behind her house. It had become a graveyard of forgotten things, broken wind chimes, an old bird cage, a lawn chair missing 2 legs. Marlena wore gloves and a headscarf, humming a jazz tune under her breath. "What's this?" I asked, pulling out a dusty suitcase. She turned. Oh God, that thing. Inside were clothes from another life. Tight skirts, sequined tops, a business card holder. I recognized her maiden name printed on one Marlena Voss, event strategist. Boston. You never told me about Boston, I said. Some chapters don't need retelling, but some deserve remembering. She paused. I was someone else there. Someone I liked more. And less. Same, I said, for Ohio. And just like that, we shared something else. The truth that every woman who starts over carries a city behind her ribs. A name she used to answer to. A version of herself that only comes out in dreams. We burned the business cards in her fire pit. Watched the smoke curl into the sky. Watched the past go with it. That night she fell asleep early. I stayed up sitting by the window with a book in my lap and no intention of reading it. And across the street, Glenna's light was still on. She was knitting like always. She looked up, saw me, and lifted her glass of water in a quiet toast. I lifted mine. 2 women with full lives and secret histories. 2 women who had finally let themselves be known. Ew. Later, as Marlena stirred beside me, she whispered, "What are you thinking about?" "The box," I said. "The letter." She didn't ask what it said. She already knew. "I didn't burn it," I added. "Good," she said sleepily. "Some things deserve to survive us." I used to think the worst thing in life was to be unloved. Then I thought it was to be unseen. Now I know it's to be known only by the wrong people. Because love without understanding is a performance. But Marlena, she didn't clap for the woman I pretended to be. She handed me a mirror and waited until I could look. He came to the window like a ghost. It was late past 10. Marlena and I were curled up on the couch watching a documentary about forgotten opera singers sipping ginger tea. The only light came from the TV and the soft glow of a lamp in the corner. Then we saw the shadow, tall, still. It moved across the front lawn like it had a right to be there. My breath caught. I knew it was him before he stepped into view. Brian, standing outside Marlena's front window, peering in like a man looking through a museum exhibit. His face was gaunt, shirt half tucked. That desperate look of someone who just realized the door they slammed shut doesn't reopen. Marlena stood first, calm, composed, frighteningly still. "I'll call the police," she said. "No," I said already, walking to the door. Because I needed to say something. For me. When I opened the door, he stepped back like I might hit him. Maybe he expected tears, or begging, or shame. What he didn't expect was how clear my voice sounded when I said, "You're trespassing." He scoffed. "It's a public sidewalk." "You're not on the sidewalk." He shoved his hands into his pockets, eyes darting past me into the warm glow of the home that was never his. "You really moved in with her." I nodded. I did. He laughed, bitter. "You're not who I thought you were." "No," I said. "I'm finally not." He looked down, then up again. "You know I never cheated on you to hurt you. That's the thing about cowards, Brian. They never mean to hurt you. They just don't care enough not to." His jaw clenched. "I thought you'd wait for me," he muttered. "I did," I said. "For too many years. for too many missed birthdays and cold silences and apologies that never came. He looked at me like he didn't recognize the woman speaking, and that was fine. Because he didn't. He never did. You always wanted someone like her, he finally spat. Admit it, someone stronger than you. I smiled. Brian, I said I didn't fall in love with Marlena because she's strong. I fell in love with her because she didn't need to pretend I wasn't. He flinched. And for once I didn't soften. Didn't reach. Didn't explain myself into smallness. I let the silence stretch. Let the truth sit between us. Undeniable. You should go, I said at last. She's watching, he said, nodding toward the window. I hope she is. Because I wanted her to see what I looked like when I stopped apologizing. He left. No goodbye. No plea. No spin. Just a man walking away from a woman who no longer looked back. When I came inside, Marlena had poured me another cup of tea. She didn't ask what I said. She just reached out and wrapped her arms around me, and for a while we didn't move. You okay? She whispered against my shoulder. I nodded. I think I've never been more okay. She pulled back slightly, searching my face. You did it, she said. What? You closed the window. We sat on the floor that night, leaning against each other, surrounded by candles and cushions and shadows that no longer scared us. You know what I regret most? I asked softly. She shook her head. That I spent so much time wishing someone would open a door for me, when all along I had keys I never used. She kissed the top of my head and said, you don't need doors anymore. You built your own house. Later I wrote a letter to myself. A strange exercise maybe, but necessary. I wrote, Dear Cara, you are not broken. You are not ruined. You are not too late. You are allowed to change the ending. You are allowed to rewrite the story even if you were halfway through the book. And most of all, you are allowed to be loved in the present tense. I sealed it and tucked it inside the velvet box, next to the photo, next to the past, because I wanted it there when I looked back years from now, to remember that once a woman like me learned to look through the glass and stopped seeing herself as something to hide. It started with a knock at the door. Not a dramatic one, not urgent, just two soft raps like someone unsure if they belonged. I opened it barefoot, expecting Glenna or a delivery. Instead, it was Marlena, holding a small folded piece of paper in one hand, and wearing a look I'd never seen on her before. She looked scared. Read this, she said. She handed me the paper and stepped inside. No kiss, no smirk, just trembling fingers. I unfolded it. It was a letter, handwritten, but not from her husband, Dean. Marlena, I know you won't take my calls, and I won't fight you anymore. You win. You always did. But I left something in the desk drawer upstairs. Not money, just what's left of my truth. If you want closure, it's there. If not, I'll disappear for good. But for what it's worth, you taught me more than I ever admitted, and I'll regret not listening sooner. I looked up. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I haven't gone up there yet, she whispered. I thought, maybe you'd come with me. We climbed the stairs together. Each creak in the wood sounded louder than usual. In her old office, the room she never entered anymore, we found the drawer. She opened it. Inside a leather-bound journal, a flash drive, a photo album. She took the journal, handed me the flash drive. You read it, she said. I'll look at the pictures. We sat on the floor backs against the old desk, and for the next hour we unraveled the pieces of a man we never fully knew. The journal was full of half-written letters. To her, to his father, to himself. They weren't profound, but they were honest. Scared, confused, cowardly, but also remorseful. There was one line that caught me like a blade. I thought control was love. I didn't know how to hold her without pressing down. Marlena read that part over my shoulder. She didn't cry. She just whispered he wasn't evil, just unfinished. I nodded. Me too, I said. She turned to me then, took my face in her hands, and said, do you still want to do this? I knew what she meant. Us. This life. This strange, messy, beautiful second act. Yes, I said, without hesitation, without apology. That weekend we invited a few people over. Glenna, an old friend of Marlena's from Boston, who had once lived through her own storm. A young couple from down the street who always smiled too nervously but brought wine. We didn't call it a party, just coffee and sunlight. But we lit candles, played music, rearranged the living room so everyone could face each other. And when someone asked, so are you two? Marlena looked at me, let me speak. And I said simply, yes, we are. The conversation didn't stop. No one gasped. Glenna smiled into her teacup, and I felt something inside me settle for the first time in years. Peace. Not the kind that comes from silence, but the kind that comes from truth. Later that night, when everyone had gone, Marlena and I danced in the kitchen again. Same jazz, same swaying, but this time the curtains were open, the lights were on, and I didn't flinch when I saw my reflection in the glass. Because for once I recognized her. I was no longer the woman who watched, or the woman who needed rescuing, or the woman who stayed quiet when she wanted to scream. I was the woman who said yes to rebuilding, yes to being seen, yes to real. As we climbed into bed, Marlena turned to me. "There's one more thing I want." "What?" "A photo." I laughed. "Of us. Of this." She grabbed the old Polaroid camera from the bookshelf, the one she used to document strangers. Now she aimed it at the bed, snapped once, then handed me the photo as it developed. We waited in silence, watching our image slowly appear. Two women in robes, barefaced, feet tangled beneath a quilt, smiling not for the camera, but for each other. And on the back she wrote, "No more glass between us." It's been a year, one full year since the last time I crossed the lawn with a rag in my hand and an ache in my chest. Since I reached through her open window pretending it was about dust and sunlight, pretending it wasn't about her. I don't clean her windows anymore. I wake up beside her now. We share toothpaste, coffee filters, silence. She takes her tea strong. I warm the cup first for her now, just like she showed me. Our mornings are quiet, unceremonious, but in that quiet there is a peace I never thought I'd earn. No more secrets. No more photographs hidden in boxes. No more watching through the glass, wondering if she was looking back. Because now when I see her across the table, I don't have to wonder. She sees me, and she doesn't look away. People still talk. They still glance too long at the grocery store or whisper at HOA meetings. But their whispers don't cut the way they used to. Because the life I have now, I built it with my eyes open, with both hands, with truth, with her. Some days I still walk past my old house. It's been rented now. A young couple lives there, the kind that still holds hands in public and argues about compost bins. The front window has been replaced. New trim, new panes. No trace of the woman who once stood behind it, desperate to be noticed. That woman is gone. And in her place is someone softer, braver. Someone who learned that being watched is not the same as being loved, and that being loved doesn't mean losing yourself. This morning, Marlena pulled out the box. The velvet one. She placed it on the table like she used to, and I knew without asking she'd added something. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Us. At the farmer's market last week. We weren't posing, just laughing. Her hand on my back, my head tilted toward her. On the back she'd written, "This is what it looks like when the story is yours." I didn't cry. I just held it, pressed it against my heart, because for the first time I knew it was true. Sometimes I think about that first day. The window, the rag in my hand, the quiet, terrible thrill of being near her things. And I wonder, was that version of me already hoping for this? Even then, was it really just cleaning? Or was it the first brave thing I'd done in years? Now Marlena laughs when I tell people I used to break into her house to dust her baseboards. "I let you," she always says. And I always reply, "You dared me." And she winks. Because we both know it was never about the dust. It was about daring to step inside. Our story doesn't end with a wedding or a grand gesture. It ends with Tuesday nights on the porch, with Sunday brunches where she finally cooks for me, with a dog we adopted from the shelter that chews everything except our shoes, with laughter, with routine, with a new window one we open together only when we want to, not for show, not for permission, but for air, for light, for joy. I don't clean her windows anymore, because I no longer need to see her from the outside. She's here, with me, beside me. No curtains, no camera, no shame, just the woman who once watched me watching her, and chose to let me in.